Surviving the Coronavirus Crisis. An eerily empty airport in a major United States city. The coronavirus. Should we be in fear? Should we be in panic? There are very few people here. There's a lot of people that are here that are very worried. You see a lot of families here with face masks and kids, and you can tell the parents are worried by all that surrounds them. We walk past empty restaurants that had to close down. There's a sense of fear and panic in the air. Even on the television, everywhere you look here, people are talking about the coronavirus. So as Americans and as Christians, how are we going to deal with this? What are we going to do?
To find out more about this coronavirus crisis, my film crew and I got on a very empty airplane and flew to a very empty Atlanta airport. Several people had recommended that I speak with a microbiologist by the name of Dr. Andrew Fabich. Dr. Fabich is an expert in bacteria and viruses and an author of many popular articles about these issues. He is a science professor at Truett-McConnell University in northern Georgia.
What is a virus?
Textbook definition for virus is obligate intracellular parasite. And I know you're like, what did he just say? It basically means viruses need cells. If they don't have cells, they can't do what they're supposed to do.
So they have to have a host.
Yeah.
Is every virus bad?
Actually, no. What I think most people are shocked to find out is the vast majority of viruses we don't actually know about because they don't do anything bad, and we only look for the bad ones, and we never stop and study all the good ones. And when I say all of them that are out there, I'm talking upwards of 95% of all viruses on the planet are still very good. It's just the 5% that get all of the press, in particular this one happening here today.
Another biologist that I wanted to ask about the coronavirus crisis was my friend Dr. Robert Carter. Dr. Carter was a guest of mine on the popular InGrace series called Exploring God's Oceans. He's a speaker for Creation Ministries International, a prolific author of many scientific papers and articles, and he specializes in genetics.
Hey Jim, you asked an excellent question. Why did God create viruses? Well, the answer is actually pretty cool. Most viruses aren't bad. Most viruses actually are good. They're good for us and they're good for the environment. Now, I explained this in an article on creation.com. It's just called Coronaviruses. Very simple. The answer is this. When God created this world, He also created bacteria. And bacteria have the potential to grow really fast, and they tend to eat everything they run into. So He provided a way to control these bacteria in like our gut. I mean, have you heard that we have got like 100 trillion cells in our body, and that there are more bacteria in our body than there are cells? Well, this is true, but there are actually more viruses than bacteria. And the viruses are there to control the bacterial population, to control the number of bacteria and the species of bacteria. Viruses are good for us. There are also viruses in the ocean that are controlling the amount of bacteria and the species in the ocean, which is good for the fish and good for us when we go swimming in the ocean. Most viruses are good. That's why viruses exist. There are some viruses, however, that are bad. Now, how do we explain these from a creation context? These are viruses that have escaped their initial created design. Either they jump to a new species, like humans, that have never seen this virus before and our immune systems don't know how to deal with it. Or maybe there are viruses that were under control at one point, but a mutation has occurred in their genome that allows them to escape whatever mechanism was keeping them in control. These are bad viruses. These are things that are no good and things we need to fight against.
You think the viruses were part of the original creation that was very good?
Yeah. In general, I think most viruses are actually were originally created to be part of the genomes of every creature on the planet. People are shocked to find out that organisms like, I want to say it's the wallaby and the guinea pig and certain bats, they contain the entire genome for a different virus. Ebola is found present in those genomes. It's not doing anything that we can tell, and maybe it came from there originally, but when we look at those genomes, we can't say they're doing anything bad. It's when we look at viruses that are present in genomes of everything that's out there, we usually find some good essential function associated with it. For example, none of us would be here today in the human population if it weren't for a virus that's dormant in our genome. It gets turned on when we're in utero, developing as a fetus, and if we didn't have this gene, we couldn't develop properly, and every human being would be completely wiped out.
Here's the big question. What are we supposed to call it? Because we hear the coronavirus, and then we hear the COVID-19. What are we supposed to say?
The word coronavirus is like the word pasta. So that when I hear coronavirus, when I hear pasta, my logical question to ask is what kind?
So it could be the long, the squiggly.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It could be a lot of different types. There's a lot of different coronaviruses, and corona is the crown, right?
That's correct.
So it's just the way it looks. A certain virus has a certain look to it.
About 10 to 15% of the causes for the common cold are coronaviruses that we experience all of the time. You know, there's two famous coronaviruses. Back in the early 2000s, SARS was a coronavirus. And then back in, I saw 2012, I believe it was when we had MERS out in the Middle East. And that was another coronavirus. Received a lot of press. And when this current one was developing, I compared it to those outbreaks. And for a while, it was contained in China. And so I wasn't really worried about it. But then I started hearing reports of it moving to places like Thailand and Bangladesh and Japan. And once it got outside the country, then I started to become concerned. Like, this is not like SARS. This is not like MERS.
Because it's spreading so
something different
and so easily.
A lot of people are asking the question, should we really be worried about this new coronavirus? I mean, is the panic justified? Should we really shut down the whole entire world in order to keep a few people from getting sick and just a few people from dying? And the answer is difficult. The answer comes from science, and we've got to apply what we know in science to this question. Well, first of all, everything we know about bad viruses are that they kill a lot of people. So is it worth shutting down the world to save some people? Yeah, it probably is. Now, are you going to be the person to ask how many people are we willing to sacrifice? No, I don't think so. We don't want to go there. We do know that this is a brand new virus. We know that the human immune system has never seen this before. We are immunologically naive to this virus. There are no antibodies to this virus floating around in the population, so theoretically, just about everyone could potentially be infected. This is a very serious concern. Scientists have been worried about viruses, specifically coronaviruses, for a long time because we know that coronaviruses have this terrible habit of jumping between species. What do? We listen to the government. We listen to the people who know. We don't go off into conspiracy land and we don't think, oh, I'm not going to get it, or it doesn't matter if I get it because I'm young and I'm not going to get sick. We actually need to be very proactive about this, very serious and very deliberate.
I feel like there still are a lot of comparisons to be made between COVID-19 and the flu. But the one, I think, key difference here is that mortality rate. It seems to take advantage of those that are immunocompromised or over 55. For whatever reason, it seems to really target them. And that's a huge question mark, I think, in our understanding that we don't know anything about right now.
I asked founder of Answers in Genesis, Ken Ham, about the origins of harmful viruses.
Why is there such a thing as a virus that's harmful?
You know, it's interesting. In the Bible, in the New Testament, we read about the Tower of Siloam that fell on people, and there were 18 killed. And Jesus asked the question, were they worse sinners than others, that they would die? And his answer was, look, that was their turn to die, and you're all going to die. So you all need to make sure that you're ready to die, that your heart is ready with the Lord. And I would say the same thing in regard to what's happening today. First of all, we need to understand we live in a fallen world, so we have to suffer the consequences of a fallen world. And even though there are viruses that do good things and bacteria that do good things, there's a small percentage of them, because it's a fallen world, can now do bad things.
Some viruses have gone rogue. They've escaped, they've changed, they've left their initial created state, but this is part of something called the curse. This goes all the way back to the first couple of chapters of Genesis, where it tells us clearly when God created everything, He created very good. But that good creation fell into corruption when Adam rebelled against God. And now the universe today is under corruption, it's under this curse, it's under the weight of sin, and bad things are happening. And as things are crumbling, as systems are falling apart, as the weight of decay and corruption is filling the world, well, viruses are part of that, and viruses get affected by that. And so every once in a blue moon, a virus escapes, either mutates to something bad or jumps into a species that it wasn't originally designed for, and it sweeps across that whole species and can potentially kill a lot of people. But, we get colds a lot, but they usually don't kill us. Why? Well, I suspect that the first time the coronaviruses that cause cold jumped into people, I don't think the original people, they probably killed off an awful lot of people. Sadly, and it would have been a tragedy, 5 or 10% of the whole world's population gets wiped out. And then as that virus mutates more and more and more, it slows down, it becomes less deadly, and it morphs into what we today call the common cold.
The result from the fall was death, disease, pain, and suffering. And specifically, God mentioned, He told Adam and Eve about thorns and thistles. Those are things that you and I can see. We don't need a microscope. But I feel like when we look in the microscope at things like viruses, I think of them like molecular thorns or molecular thistles. And so they are part of the curse. And within a biblical time frame, the thing that's amazing for me as I was studying as a student, every virus they talk about having evolved recently. Every one of them. I can't think of a single exception by evolutionary standards. I've got a virology textbook open in my office right now that shows how all viruses trace back by evolutionary estimates just 4,000 years ago. If you're holding to a biblical time frame, that means those viruses weren't even on the ark.
From previous historical examples of epidemics and plagues, we know they tend to burn out over time. Sometimes they burn out because the weather changes. Sometimes they burn out because they run out of people. Sometimes they burn out because the virus mutates and becomes less effective. I don't necessarily know what the answer is. We are on an exponential curve, and we're going like that. Lots and lots and lots of people are going to come down with this, and every day more and more. So potentially, our medical systems could be overwhelmed. Potentially. We don't know that because, maybe it doesn't like springtime, and maybe it needs cold weather to survive, and maybe people will actually practice social distancing to the extent that we actually put a lid on this thing and we what's called flatten the curve. And so instead of having a giant spike, we have a slow burn and a slow drop off. And that would be wonderful because that means that our health systems could keep up with what's about to happen.
Now that we know more about the origin and details about harmful viruses, I wanted to ask my guests what Christians should be doing about this crisis.
In God's sovereignty, there's a time to be born and a time to die. And so it's a time, I think, for Christians to reach out to people and say, wait a minute, as a Christian, we shouldn't be panicking. We shouldn't be fearful of these things. What we should be doing is telling people why this happens, because we sinned against a holy God. And therefore, we need to use our responsibility to the best we can to look after people and ourselves. Yeah. But the most important thing is the saving gospel, because every one of them is going to die anyway.
I think one of the things we really need to promote right now within the gospel conversations we have is that Jesus is our great physician for the sin problem of viruses that we have in every person on the planet. It's infected us. It's caused all sorts of problems. Nothing good ever came of it, but the great physician knows the solution. And he offers it freely to anyone who will receive it.
So he provided a cure
Yeah,
for every person.
yeah. I can't help but think about the purpose behind the Gospel of John, where he states at the beginning and the end of it, "These things have I written that you might believe." It's not about the physical healing that we can get, but it's a deeper issue than that. It's about having a right relationship with the Creator of the universe.
For someone who's questioning their mortality, who's wondering if they're going to be here tomorrow, this is a perfect time to tell people about the love of Jesus Christ.
We need to be the hands and feet of Jesus right now in a literal way. We're going out, we can help people meet their needs. We can teach them good, proper hand washing and tell them about how Jesus can make us whiter than snow.
Beautiful. Hey,
All right, yeah.
We were not called to fear, we're called to hope, and we're called to rejoice in the coming reality of our Savior, Jesus Christ.
now that we know more about why harmful viruses exist, let's learn how to find peace even in the midst of crisis. The world a few short months ago was going about its business, mostly not aware of a very real danger. I'm not talking about the COVID-19 right now. I'm talking about a more dangerous problem, and most were oblivious. While I'm not trying to minimize the coronavirus danger, there are much worse things trying to kill us every day. Influenza kills 59,000 Americans annually. And the biggest killers by far are cancer, 600,000, and heart disease, 655,000. Death is inevitable, undeniable, and irreversible. More dangerous than dying from a virus or cancer or heart disease is dying without being saved from a virus called sin. God created us in a perfect environment. Then one fateful day, our ancestors chose to rebel against our wonderful Creator. Romans 5:12 says, "Wherefore as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin, and so death passed upon all men, for that all have sinned." The virus of sin began to infect everybody. Romans 8:22 says, "For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now." Many people think that they're okay. They've never committed murder, therefore they're pretty good people. Although all have not sinned in the same manner and the same measure, all have sinned. That's what Romans 3:23 says. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Though all may not be equally guilty, still all are guilty before God. We have come short, and that means to miss the mark. It's like an archer missing the bullseye. The bullseye is God's perfection. As a matter of fact, we've missed the target entirely. We all have been infected with the virus of sin. We cannot save ourselves. The good news is found in Ephesians 2. But God, who is rich in mercy, for his great love wherein he loved us, even when we were dead in sins, hath quickened us together with Christ. By grace ye are saved. What qualifies Jesus to be able to save us? The fact that he is God, made flesh, who dwelt among us, but was never infected by sin at birth, nor did he ever pick up the virus of sin in life. And yet he still died in our place for our sin. If you want to be saved from the virus of sin, say something like this to a holy God: Lord, I'm a sinner. I can't save myself. But right now, I'm putting my full trust in Jesus. I believe that he died for my sins on the cross and rose again. Thank you
for saving me, and help me to live my life to serve you and love you because you first loved me. I pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. You, my friend, are now a child of God. He will never lose you nor forsake you. He will be with you in the worst of storms. He will be your peace when all the world is in a panic. No longer do you need to fear death because Jesus, your Savior, conquered death for you.
InGrace is a viewer-supported ministry. Thank you for your prayers and gifts.